Ready? I'd like to call to order the regular board meeting for Tuolumne Utilities District of February 14th, 2023. Director Ringham, would you like to do this with the allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public forum. We would like to welcome the members of the public who have taken the time to attend this meeting to provide comments on matters related to district business. Any member of the public may address the board relating to any matter within the board's jurisdiction. This need not be related to any item on the agenda. However, the board cannot act on an item unless it is noticed on the agenda. Persons speaking during public comment will be limited to 5 minutes. Depending on the number of persons wishing to speak, it may be reduced to allow all members of the public the opportunity to address the board. Director Reagan.
Good morning, everyone. Ron Ringen, TUD ratepayer. What I want to bring to your attention today is, well, first, this has to do with Valley Vista development down there in Jamestown off of Golf Links Road. First thing is LAFCO originally decided and determined that TUD would supply the water and Jamestown Sanitary District would take care of the sewage service for the development. Second, somehow, and the details are really murky at best, depending on who you talk to, Koff from the Valley Vista, Ron Koff from the Valley Vista developer, determined that the Jamestown Sanitary District can't or won't provide the sewer service for their development. Then comes the good part. The TUD Board of Directors, with no advance information or discussion about the issue, were faced with, we have to do this agenda item orchestrated by Koff, Rucker, and Pattison. Conveniently, the TUD Board was not told that every TUD staff member said, don't do it, bad idea. Was the Tuolumne County LAFCO ever consulted, and did they give their approval for TUD to provide that sewer service? Who knows, as we had Koff as a representative on LAFCO at that time, thanks to Rucker, as I remember. The TUD board, having been coerced into believing that this was a dire situation that, if not passed, would stop the Valley Vista development from moving forward. The TUD board was not given any real details of how this development's sewer system was to connect to TUD. Wastewater sewer system, just that the developer would be paying for it, and it was to be installed, would be paying for it to be installed, and it wouldn't cost the TUD ratepayer anything. That was one of the questions that I asked personally. Will it cost the ratepayer anything? No, it won't. TUD board passed the agenda item thinking with the information provided and with prodding that we were doing the right thing. This action, from the information I observed later, really inflamed Jamestown Sanitary District and negatively impacted theirs and TUD's relationship, which has always been good. So that is a very brief backstory. I was never in favor of taking on the Valley Vista development sewer service, but was led to believe that it was absolutely necessary. However, being suspicious, I kept digging for more details on how this sewer system was going to actually work. The sewer system in the development will flow to a lift station to be built in the subdivision, then piped uphill under Highway 108, and then up to the Millville lift station. This is a system that TUD does not want to inherit and maintain. But if At this point in time, TUD cannot back out of this bad deal. Then at bare minimum, I feel the developer should be responsible for paying for a solar array to power the lift station in the development and a reasonable portion of the solar array to power the Mill Villa lift station. I feel it would be a huge injustice to the TUD ratepayers to pay the electrical cost to pump the development sewage twice to get it to regional wastewater treatment plant into perpetuity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public comment. Consent calendar, Melissa?
Okay, item number 1, minutes of the regular board meeting of January 24th, 2023. Item number 2, approval of reimbursement claims for director's statement of meeting.
Excuse me. I wanted to make a public comment, but I didn't see the little raise your hand on the Zoom.
Okay, state your name and we'll go ahead and give you 5 minutes.
Okay. Name is Kent Schillestrom. I'm a resident. I live on Phoenix Lake Road and on the Phoenix Lake. And I just had some questions regarding, the recent issues on Phoenix Lake. And I was just curious, one, is there any update on the emergency funds to repair the storm damage to Phoenix Lake? Not sure if you can answer that, or I'll just give you all my questions. Now, if funding received, will the lake need to be drained for the repair work? And if so, would this be a prime opportunity and cost savings to continue with the needed dredging in the south and east pools and some of the other things associated with the original project? And third question, I guess, is any update on the magnitude of the damage? We have a resident of the lake, Jeff Berger, took some outstanding video as well as pictures of the damage, which he or Sally is going to send to you guys later today to view, which shows pretty significant erosion.
Pardon me, Ken.
Pardon?
Pardon me, Ken. You're asking us to comment on something that's not on the agenda. And unfortunately, we can't do that.
Well, and that leads to the next question. Can we get this on the agenda for the next meeting?
Well, you can certainly put a request in.
And okay, there's a format for that, I guess. Okay.
You can always call me at my extension or
My name is Eric
today. If you want to, you can just give us a call. We can answer that and any questions. Yeah. Would that be
again, since this is still public comment, I can ask these questions. I guess you can't comment on them.
Sure.
But because and then the fourth is that the original Horizon design had called for multiple sedimentation ponds. I'm just curious if, had we followed their recommendations, would there have been less damage in this storm than we received with the single? And again, just those are all things that we wanted to bring to your attention.
Okay.
Feel free to reach out to me at my extension 480.
480. Okay. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, any other public comment? Corey, out there on the web?
Not that I'm seeing.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. I should have asked that earlier. Okay, consent calendar, Melissa.
Okay, item number 1, minutes of the regular board meeting of January 24th, 2023. Item number 2, approval of reimbursement claims for director's statement of meetings attended and or travel expenses and claim summary for January 2023.
Is there any director that'd like to pull one of the 2 items on the consent calendar? Director Raymond.
Claim summary.
Claim summary, okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So on page 1, Aqua W/C insurance, $47,456. What is that for?
That's our quarterly workers' compensation payment.
Oh, okay, okay. And maybe at some point in time, we could get some sort of update as how we're doing, because I know the folks have been really working hard making sure that no one gets hurt, and everything goes smooth, so it'd be nice to know what our rating is.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Also on, page 1 is, alley tree service, and, $61,600. I hope that was put out to bid.
It was put out to bid, and this is a grant funded fuels reduction.
Oh, it was grant funded besides, okay, well, that's good news. Page 2 is, hot start engine heaters. Is that for the, generators?
Is that,
Part of Bank of America.
Yeah.
Eric Call's out ill today, so he probably best to answer this question, but I can get the answer and get back to you.
Okay, great. I mean, I can't imagine those would be for any of the vehicles, but it would seem to me to be for the generators or something. But it's still, it's like $550 some odd dollars. Not cheap. Page 3, Cal Department of Fish and so on. What in the world is $6,236 for to fishing, wildlife, whatever they call themselves today?
It's the permit fee for the Sierra Pines 1602 application, permit application. It's based on the value of the project, so they have a graduated scale, and given the size of the project, the permit fee, application fee, I should say, is $6,206.
How do they get their fingers in on that? I mean, if we don't have anything, you know, I don't understand why they're even involved.
Well, it's a long story, but I'll just make it very brief. They believe that they have jurisdiction over some of the wetland features, the riparian areas out at Sierra Pines, the pond that's out on site, and we are impacting that when we build the larger pond.
I wonder if they realize that it used to be a golf course. All right, page 3, once again. I don't really understand this at all. CDTFA, whatever that is, annual water rights, Brentwood and Lakewood. $1,500. What's that all about?
I think Eric Hall may be better suited to answer this question as well. I don't know the acronym CDTFA, but we do pay for those water rights fees, and that's, you know, as it says, an annual fee. So for those 2 water rights.
I just can't find enough ways to get into our back pocket. Let's see, Condor Earth, special inspections, $4,700. Has that got to do with the wastewater treatment? Okay. We got to be their very best friend by now. Page 11, No B4 Incorporated. That's a good one. $1,900.
Corey, that's
Right.
our yearly renewal for the cybersecurity training for all employees.
Oh, okay, great. 13, Uniquip Incorporated, Pulsar Equipment, $9,700.
I'll take that one. Pulsar is a name brand. What it is, it's a measuring device for levels of tanks and storage tanks or flows, flow channels or something along those natures. This may be, again, Eric's more better for this. This may be related to the damage that we've sustained up at big hill water treatment plant where hit a lightning bolt, hit the plant and dialed out a number of pieces of equipment.
So it's measuring equipment. Okay.
Monitoring.
14, Pacific Advanced Civil Engineering. And it's Twain Hart, something, I don't know, design. Is that for the Sierra Pines again?
No, that is for, it's a capital item in your budget for improvements to the Twain Hart wastewater treatment plant. And Pace has been hired to assist in the design.
So we are beginning to work on that. Okay, great. Because I know that's been a problem. 14, Pacific Mobile Structures Monthly Rental Modular Building. Is that one?
Right.
We should have bought it. That's pretty high rent.
Yeah, well,
15, Pape Machinery Exchange. $171. What is Pape Machinery Exchange?
I believe that's where Jimmy gets the parts for the big equipment, the backhoes and the large.
It's a John Deere dealer.
Oh, it is. Okay, great.
Not Jimmy, Will, sorry.
Flashback.
Jimmy retired, sorry.
And then the last one is on page 16, Sierra Consultants Incorporated, Sullivan Creek Easements.
Land and Structure doing business as Sierra Consultants. So Land and Structure is our local engineering surveying firm. The district doesn't have a land surveyor on staff, so we outsource that, and we hired them to provide surveying support for easements that are needed for the capital project of replacing the pipeline across Sullivan Creek. It comes out of Phoenix Lake and then goes to the Sonora Water Treatment Plant.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else on the consent calendar? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. Okay, Melissa, regular business.
Okay, item number 3, consideration to adopt resolution expressing appreciation to Tuolumne Utilities District staff for their dedication to the district and the community during the recent storms through the New Year holidays and through January 2023.
Good morning, President Kern, members of the board. It's hard to believe with this beautiful sunshiny weather that just a few weeks ago we were swimming. Exactly. It sure felt like that. So today, you heard a couple of updates in the last meeting about the work that our crews were doing over the severe storms that we had from the end of December through the middle of January. So today we just wanted to officially recognize our staff for their hard work and dedication to this district and the community, and making sure that we could provide continuous service and with minimal interruption. So a lot went on during the period of December 27th through January 16th. The National Weather Service reports that there were 9 atmospheric rivers in that 3-week period of time, and we felt them. While all of that is wonderful for our water supply, and we've got a great snowpack, 200% or so up there, we're really happy about. That will help us. It certainly can create quite a bit of challenges for us here at the district. And the majority of our challenges, the way to solve it is to get as many staff members out there and responding to the various aspects of our water and wastewater system. And so that's what we did over that period of time. So we had holidays within there that we had folks working, obviously at nights and weekends, like they do 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so if I may, I will read through this resolution and then talk a little bit about specific departments and then welcome your comments as well. So for this resolution, expressing appreciation to district staff for their dedication to the district and community during the recent series of storms through the New Year's and Martin Luther King Jr. holidays. Whereas days after the Christmas holiday and for the 3 weeks that followed through the New Year's and Martin Luther King Jr. holidays to January 16th, 2023, Tuolumne County experienced 9 atmospheric river events bringing significant daily rainfall, electrical storms, heavy snow to higher elevations, and high winds. As a result of extreme weather conditions, emergency response was needed due to 4 mainline breaks, sections of ditch being blocked with accumulations of snow, ice, and debris, and overwhelmed with stormwater, ditch berm failures, flooding, damage from fallen trees, power outages, generator and SCADA failures, all resulting in an extraordinary number of after hours for holidays, nights, and weekends, and hundreds of hours of overtime while the crews worked tirelessly to maintain continuous water and wastewater services to the residents of Tuolumne County. And whereas while many were enjoying their friends, family, and joys of the season, the majority of TUD employees canceled their plans and showed up for the community. And whereas district staff worked as a cohesive team with diligence and tenacity during this time, displaying extraordinary commitment and dedication by stepping up and doing what needed to be done. And whereas district staff worked long and arduous hours in harsh weather conditions while still protecting public health and looking out for each other's health and safety, leading to 0 work-related injuries. And whereas the Board of Directors of Tuolumne Utilities District and the residents of Tuolumne County served by the district commend the following district staff for working around the clock to maintain and restore order to the district's various water and wastewater systems. So while all involved district personnel are commended for their outstanding efforts above and beyond the call of duty and recognized for their sacrifice during this time frame, but especially the following departments and individuals who work 1 or more holidays at night and on their scheduled days off. So for the Administrative Services Department, Emily Long worked long into the night responding to boil water notice that we had to issue following one of the mainline breaks in the middle of the severe storm. In engineering, we had Jennifer Batt and Glenn Memley working around the clock, both for issues experienced at the regional wastewater treatment plant and monitoring storms. In finance, Ken Ingram, our purchasing agent, worked off hours so that he could make sure that the staff had the equipment and the resources and supplies that they needed. And then really all operations, it was all hands on deck across the board, and just want to really give a big shout out to operations because they did the brunt of many, many days in a row of working out in very, very wet weather. So with that, I would also personally like to give a big shout out to all of the staff. They get after it, and you see some of the best teamwork and the best camaraderie and just rapport with each other during these hard times. And they do it every time we need them, and I just really appreciate them. And with that, if anyone has anything to add or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yes.
I asked several times during that onslaught how the crews and everybody were doing, and I'm amazed with the amount of work that had to be done in the conditions that were that they had to experience. No one was injured. I think that's fabulous.
Correct.
Director Boatright.
I'd like to take an opportunity to, thank the crews for their dedication and hard work. And, this is another opportunity where we as a board get to show appreciation for our staff, their dedication. Certainly their sacrifice away from families, time off, and other things that, they, be normally doing with their time. And the crews just, always seem to amaze and rise to the occasion. And I'm sure there was a lot of cross work and where employees may be in a area that they are not normally associated working in. I'm sure that these atmospheric rivers put all of our systems, raw water, collections and treatment through the ringer. Certainly in trying to keep up with changing conditions moment to moment. The crews are definitely appreciated. Thank you very much.
I think, yeah, well said, and I just want to acknowledge them because the crews are actually responding and dealing with more water coming onto the county than is leaving the county. And it's not just in the TUD system, they are collecting and dealing with and managing and redirecting, diverting water that's in our watershed. They're the responders, they're the first responders to the whole watershed. It's just like fire. It's, water's not just scooting over to other jurisdictional boundaries, they're taking on the whole watershed. And I just want to commend them for doing that. I also want to say I was sharing your pain because I have, sandbagged, 45 bags and out there in the sleet and the snow, slugging them around. And it's really invigorating work, to be honest, it happens. And, but I found that the more self-contained TUD is in terms of self-reliance and self-empowerment, and the crews know their job and they know where the resources are. We already have the resources on hand. Unlike the county that provided sand with no bags, no shovel, no nothing. I just want to say to the crews and to TUD, having as much of the resources on site here, because time is critical in the flooding situation. And thank God the water wants to leave the county, does not want to hang around. It wants to leave, and so we're really lucky that way too. But it's very humbling to get out there and deal with the water. And I just want to say from personal experience, that ability to access the resources right here, especially on New Year's Eve, is phenomenal, and that I think also helps our response. And I just want to thank the crews so much. That they're handling it for the whole county.
And I would add to, part of the success as we go through these storms is that we have many employees that have been around the block a few times when it comes to these storms, and the institutional knowledge is invaluable. It's invaluable to have these employees that have been able to go through these emergencies and now be able to handle them with calm, good decision making and all of those things. That doesn't come. We have a lot of new employees too, so they were following, and they had really good leadership. And I know we don't put managers or anything on this, but Eric Hall was working around the clock, and he, obviously he's operations director and manages the majority of the staff that were out there and did an amazing job. And to have these employees that have been there and done that, but also willing to keep coming out every storm. So just wanted to add.
Yeah, I agree, Abby, and I think to echo some of these comments as well. I've always had a lot of respect for TUD and the staff here, but not since I've been on the board and seen behind the curtain, so to speak. Truly how professional, how prepared, how the employees go the extra mile is really quite amazing and pretty impressive. And I'm glad we're doing this resolution. Those of us as ratepayers, we tend to take it for granted. We go to the kitchen faucet, turn it on, flush the toilet, take a shower, do whatever we're doing. We really have no clue what goes on behind that and what it takes to get that water delivered there in a safe, portable way. And this event that we just went through last month is a perfect example of that, of the dedication and the expertise, all the details that go into keeping our drinking water safe and delivered to us in a proper way. It's really quite amazing, and all the things that as well. So, anybody else?
I won't continue to say all the wonderful things that you all just said, because you're all spot on. I think on the 28th meeting, I gave you some detail of what some of those departments were going through. What's unique, and Director Boatwright knows this firsthand, and he mentioned it, this was just different, right? Over the years, we've had many disasters, whether the tree goes through the flume at Sierra Pines, we have that kind of action. That really kind of affects maybe the raw water division and the treated water division. But this one impacted every department. So anyway, I won't go through all that detail, but we do appreciate your kind words and your recognition, and I will assure you that we will deliver that message to each and every one of the staff members. So thank you very much.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Public comment?
Sure, go. I'm sorry, yeah, we have public comment, I'm sorry. Any public comment?
At the moment, I'd like to.
Okay,
President Kern, I would like to make the motion that the Board of Directors by motion consider approving the attached resolution expressing appreciation to the Tuolumne Utilities District staff for their hard work and dedication to the district and the community during the recent winter storms spanning from December 22nd or 27th, 2022 through New Year's and Martin Luther King Jr.'s holidays to January 16th of 2023.
thank you, Director Boatright, seconded by Director Band. Okay, all those in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one, Mr. President.
Yes.
I want to thank you, Abby, for giving this a public place for them and to be acknowledged in public. This is, and that we haven't actually, we talk about it, how important this is. So thanks for writing this up on behalf of you. Thank you.
Okay, Melissa, next item.
Okay, item number 4, review the draft cost of service rate study preliminary report.
Okay, good morning, President Kearns and board members. At the January 10th board meeting, staff and Steve provided you a cost of services analysis preliminary report. At the conclusion of that agenda item, you directed staff to prepare a, while we're here today, cost of services analysis preliminary report. And for the last month or so, Steve and his department and myself have worked pretty hard on providing you this updated information. So I'll hand it over to Steve.
Good morning, board members, members of the public. Steve Sheffield, your finance director. As Don said at the January 10th meeting, the board directed us to go ahead and proceed with preparing a draft cost of services rate study report. In your board packet is the attached draft report that details the rate analysis in 5 years of proposed water rates effective July 1st, 2023. The rates developed in the study are designed to meet the revenue needs and are necessary and required to fund the operating and maintenance expenses of the district, debt service, capital improvements, and reserves of the water and sewer funds of the district. The final draft of the rate study will be prepared prior to your May 17th public hearing on rates. So today I have a brief PowerPoint in addition to the complete report that's in the board packet and has been posted. It's approximately 20 slides. I'll run through it. I think if I just go through, it'd probably be better and then open it up for discussion. As a reminder, today we're not asking any action from the board. This is a presentation on what we've come up with and what we're proposing. But again, if you feel the need, feel free to stop me. I may stop or just keep going. That's okay on that. So first of all, just kind of as an executive summary as to what we're covering, some key areas within the report. A reminder of why did we do this rate study? What are we looking at? The methodology of our rate structure, what's involved here, how it fits into the financial plans of the district, and finally, the rates and the impacts. As far as the why, really the reasons for the rate study that we brought up on the January 10th meeting, we're all well aware of the extraordinary inflation that we've been experiencing. CIP needs and the increase in CIP also affect the cost of supplies, not only just being able to obtain them, but the cost. Ever increasing state regulations, more is on the very near horizon. which all of the above has resulted in a projected revenue shortage. Finally, as a reminder, the last district increase was January 2020. As to the rate methodology, it's a very simple slide, but this is really extremely important. When we look at the rate study and the plan we have here, when we started out, one of the critical parts was, what is our existing rate study look like? What's involved there? How do we charge our rates for water and sewer? And early on, the kind of proposed way to go about this was to essentially maintain our existing structure. And by that I mean, back in 2015, we had a rather radical change where we went from 6 tiers to essentially 1 tier. And when that took place, we also the board decided to include 400 cubic feet within this base charge. The majority of our costs are fixed in nature, and so that's where that base charge becomes important. And so we wanted a livable amount. And even in this time of conservation and droughts and some other concerns, we've kind of gone back to that as well. But the 400 cubic feet we still feel is an important component or element in our rate structure. And so early on, we decided that's still an appropriate amount to include that. In addition to that, the district, the decision was made with this rate study that the district really should continue to use the rate revenue recovery option that has both base charges as well as the variable component. Finally, any rate methodology that we have, a critical component is, does it meet the requirements of Proposition 218? Is it supportable, allowable in doing that? So again, we have a structure in place. It has been in place since 2015. And so we really felt, for purposes of this analysis and proposal, that the most reasonable, most equitable option is to continue the structure we have rather than trying to reinvent it and look at separating classes or separating uses on there, because we really can't support that. So it's, like I said, it's just 4 little items, but it's really important for everyone to understand that. It's also critically important for the district to follow sound financial management practices. I think Director Ringen brought it up last month in there about how much work the district's done in the past 10 to 13 years is really getting the district to a balanced budget. Getting the district, a critical part of the 2015 rates were to invest in our infrastructure. And so, these sound financial management practices include, the annual operating budget, first and foremost. That's the board that adopts it, the general manager is responsible for it. But for us as a water and sewer utility, that's our primary mission, day to day, to be able to provide these. And the operating budget is just such a critical component for that. Additionally, sufficient and reasonable reserves, both from an operating and a CIP. Historically, this district has been unable to establish those reserves. We spent reserves first several decades ago, and we're still trying to recoup that. So that came into this financial plan as well. And finally, we've done a really good job not getting additional debt and paying down our debt. And so the debt we do have, there are required debt service covenants. In addition to that, the regional wastewater plant is going to be the largest debt the district's ever had, specifically through USDA, and we'll be repaying that over 40 years. So those are all critical components in this rate study as well. So ultimately, the objective, after we present you the information in January for this rate study and affecting rates, is what is the revenue requirement? What are the revenue requirements? And really, water and sewer stand by themselves. Each of them is an individual enterprise fund. Each of them are required by state law to charge appropriate, sufficient revenues to cover the operating costs, to cover the CIP, to cover those. So we separate it between water and sewer. And this first slide again, this is all in your board packet as well. I know it may be a little hard to see for the public and for you all, but essentially, this is just the water system. And what's shown here is the top half are the revenue components, and we've projected those for the following 5 fiscal years, 2024 through 2028. Down below are the critical parts of expenses, O&M labor, O&M services and supplies, the debt service component, and then finally CIP. As far as that information, that's identical to what you received in January 10th. So that's been out there. It's our best projection right now at the time. I think it is somewhat uncertain once you get down 3, 4, 5 years. So it's going to be critically important that we continue to monitor this and watch it. But really the main thrust of this was 2024. And with everything we mentioned before with inflation and everything else, what's going to happen in 2024? So what we added since the January meeting is that last line item. We basically calculated if we leave everything else the same in this analysis, as far as the structure, the methodology, the consumption, what is required for us to get back to a balanced budget. And that's where we come up with the first year would represent a 28% increase. The second year would be 2.6, the third year would be 2.4, fourth year 1.2, and the fifth year 1.5. Now in 2015, it was a rather large increase as well, but the approach was to ramp up. And so what happened there was basically, I think the first year there was a jump, but then each year after that, we had additional jumps. And by ramping up, we continued to deficit spend, we continued to incur additional losses, additional deficits to our reserves. Really what we're looking at here is, because it's been since 2020 that we've had an adjustment, and because of everything that's going on, we're really proposing to make that correction in 2024 to get us back on even keel and really continue the same level of service that we're providing right now and continue this aggressive CIP program to really make a difference. And then decreasing increases over the next 5 years. Now, each year stands on itself. The district and the board and we can't make higher increases than what we propose. They could be less or not enacted at all. But we really heard a lot from our customers over the last rate study that every year seemed to be more. You just hit me with $5, now it's another $6, now it's another $5, now it's another $4. So in this case, it's really going to be that first year correction and then significantly less. The other thing I wanted to point out here that we brought up last month, but the CIP, we took the adopted 5-year CIP plan and we averaged it. So it's 6.5 million. Now, some of those years, it may be as high as 8.5 million, but we wanted to keep the rates, we didn't want to make the rates higher than they necessarily have to be or are recommended to be. So we felt a cap on the CIP for water of $6.5 million would allow us to continue the CIP plan, but not further inflate the rate increases needed. Now, as far as sewer, a little bit different numbers, but the same basic approach here as far as the revenue expenses and the CIP. But if you look at the bottom, the first year it's 17.8%, and then the next year is 14%, then it goes to essentially 0.7, 1%, 1.5%. And really the reason for that additional year in 2025 is when we expect to have the regional sewer plant completed. And once it's completed, we would begin our repayment to USDA for the loan over a 40-year period. So that's kind of the reason for those two. So that's kind of the crux of how it was calculated. But what does the rates really look at? Now, before we jump into rates, just additional background information. This is combined historical and planned CIP. And we went back and did this chart over the past 20 years TUD over the past 20 years has invested $100 million in the CIP program. And we feel we've really seen a difference in the improvements that have been made, both in quality, reliability, safety, all those things. The adopted CIP that I just mentioned before is another $39.5 million for the next 5 years on there. So you can see, a critical component of our rates is the ability to continue investing in CIP, and we're going to continue to need that. So as I mentioned earlier, the impacts, both water and sewer, rate increases are necessary to do this and to maintain not only the quality and safety, but also the financial stability of the utilities. Now, before we look at the specific proposed rates, frequently we're asked, how do we compare to other agencies? We can't set rates based on what someone else is charging. It's not like go to Priceco or go to Safeway, who has Pepsi on sale today. I mean, every district is its own entity, has its own number of treatment plants, has its own needs, and that's what the rates are dependent upon. However, in 2015, we compared ourselves to these other 6 agencies just to get an idea of what's out there. And so we felt we should include that. This is in your board packet as well. I realize the names are hard, but this is on our average residential customer, 795 cubic feet per month. And we compare it to these other agencies. And right now, before we make any changes, we're the second lowest out of the 7 of those. As far as the sewer rates, we're again the second lowest out of the 7 agencies. If you combine a customer who has both water and sewer, we're the second lowest in total as far as the monthly rate. So now, just to input, and again, I realize we haven't quite gotten to the new rates yet, but if we put that in there, for water, what we're proposing, we essentially would be identical to Calaveras, which would make us third.
Steve,
Yes.
because we can't see those very well, could you read off the names of those other utilities?
Sure. So what we're comparing it to from left to right on water is South Tahoe Public Utilities District. Then the next one's our current rates. Next to that is Twain Harte Community Services District, Amador Water Agency, Calaveras County Water District, our proposed rates, City of Angels Camp, and Groveland Community Services District. And this is included in the report as well for members of the public and for you too. However, again, I caution you that these comparisons are very dependent, and many of these agencies are either looking at a rate study right now or considering a rate study. So these numbers are what's in effect right now, but from a water perspective, this would make us within a penny of Calaveras, so third or fourth highest, depending how you look at that. Even with the increase in sewer, we would still be the third lowest, and combined water and sewer would be the third lowest. So, really enough of that. This is the first chart that kind of shows, if you take all of that stuff I just ran through really quick, I know, but what is it resulting? Under our current structure for treated water, on the left-hand side, you see a meter size. It starts at 1 inch or less, and then it goes up to 8 inch. I can tell you right now, 97% of our meters are 1 inch or less. Okay, so that first line is where 97% of our customers are gonna sit. The current rate right now is $64.50 a month. That includes the 400 cubic feet. If you go over the 400 cubic feet, the last row there shows it's $3.40 per 100 cubic feet over that. So if you take that 28% increase I just said, we're going to go from $64.50 to $82.54. So it's $18 per month or $216 per year. The next year, fiscal year beginning 2024, it would be a $2 increase. The year after per month. The next year would be $2, then $1, then $1. So that's kind of how it goes across as far as what happens with that. Now sewer Sewer works off of, instead of a meter, you have what's called ESFR, which is equivalent single-family residence, meaning this is what we charge for the average residence. Right now, the rate is $51. If we apply that 17% that we calculated, it's gonna go from $51 a month to $9 a month, which would be $109 per year. The next year, it's gonna jump another $8, but after that, it's only 46 cents per month, 77 cents per month, and $1 a month going forward. So, I'm gonna jump to the next slide real quick because it's important to understand when we throw these numbers at you, these changes, that we have three types of customers right now. We have water-only customers, approximately 8,000. We have sewer-only customers, 650, and then we have both water and sewer, 5,504. So, when you look at those different customers, like I said before, if you had both water and sewer, your combined increase for both would be approximately $27 a month or $326 per year for those who have both. So, I know that's a whole lot to throw out at you and what we're proposing, but really, before we open it up to discussion, what comes next? As far as a timeline here, what we're proposing, and because of the Prop 218 process, these rates would become effective July 1st. Now, in order to get there, we're sitting at February 14th. We're going to take a month and then bring it back to the board with a 218 notice. So on March 14th, we'd like to ask the board to approve the 218 notice. And 2 weeks later, we would mail that notice to all our customers, including tenants and landlords. And then they have 45 days to file a formal protest. The 45 days would culminate in a public hearing to adopt on May 17th. So at May 17th, we're going to assemble the number of protests we receive, any additional information the board might want and everything else. The board at that time can choose to adopt as presented, or they can adopt something different. It can't go higher and you can't go sooner than that, but either one of those, that's what would happen as far as May 17th, that we would need to publish the notice and then have the rates go into effect July 1st. At that point, today, again, we're seeking the boards to be provided this, to the public to be provided it, input, and then again, what we're proposing would be to come back in a month with the actual 218 notice and ask the board to authorize mailing of it. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. Don, anything else to add?
Thank you.
I know I talk a lot and I talk fast, so.
Director Bailey.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I know you put in a lot of research and your explanation was really clear. So I have a question regarding the Prop 218. When we initiated it during the anticipation of the acquisition of PG&E, and then we withdrew it. Is my memory correct on that? Okay. So my question here is the rationale that we used back then for the 218 was tied to the acquisition of the PG&E assets. So how has this been considered in this current proposal?
So, the PG&E acquisition was obviously very special, and the main reason, if you go back, normally rate studies are done for most special districts every 5 years. You can't go out more than 5 years. So typically, every 5 years, districts will look at, are the rates appropriate, sufficient, not excessive, how are they fitting? Our last one was 2015. In 2019, the end of 2019, we fully planned on doing a rate study in 2020. Guess what? COVID came along. We felt everybody was so burdened by COVID and everything else, it absolutely was not the time to do a rate study. So we held off. Then the PG&E came along, much more so. And so we decided we were going to do a 218 process for the purposes of PG&E. That died the day after we mailed out the notices. So we completely scrapped that, figured we need to hold off until we decide do we need 218 or not. Fast forward, we have inflation, we have all these other reasons. So we brought to the board saying we really need to do this study now for operations. Just, I think your specific question here, in this analysis, we have not included anything for the PG&E acquisition. All the negotiations got withheld. The numbers, again, now we're additional couple years old. I really feel that if the two, if PG&E were to come back in earnest in 2024, we would need to completely relook at this and do this again. This right now is, as of right now, there are no PG&E negotiations. There are no dollars we have to come up with. These numbers are based on our operating costs as of today without PG&E.
Thank you. And as a reminder, in PG&E's communications with us, they anticipate bringing it back, I think, at the end of this year, 2023.
And even when we did it before, not to interrupt Barbara, but part of the challenge with PG&E was when's the handover going to happen? We were anticipating, we proposed, I think, a $30 a month increase for the PG&E acquisition. And that was based a lot on when are we going to take over the plant? When are we going to have to hire staff? When are we going to have to do that? So if PG&E does come back at the end of this year, then we need to relook at those things. What would be the timing and stuff? So.
Can I follow up with?
Sure.
Okay. So do I understand you saying that we may have to then go in for another 218 at that time that we resume and have a firmer idea of the PG&E acquisition, that we may have to do another 218?
Well, I would look at I think we would definitely want to look at another rate study. When you say another 218, to me, that just seems like we're just, putting cost on top of cost on top of cost. I think, part of it is inherent in these numbers, what happens with inflation? Where are we going forward? What happens with some of the technology involved? What happens with PG&E? So, and like I said, in the past, you go 5 years. Now, a lot of districts are doing rate studies every year, because things change so dramatically over the past 3 years. So I think, if the PG&E close of acquisition and all that were to happen within the next 2 years, 3 years, we're going to absolutely have to look at our cost of rates. And again, are these numbers good? I feel very strongly about the fiscal year 2024 numbers, but as you go farther out, I think there's a little bit less certainty and more of a, they call it sensitivity analysis in there. And so I definitely think, in 2024, I don't see us spending the full amount on PG&E. I think the PG&E acquisition is going to take at least a couple years, maybe 3 years on that. And by that time, we're far enough along that we're going to really know how close were we on this. Are costs going to continue to escalate? Are costs going to lighten up a little bit? Is the availability of supplies going to improve? But
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Go right.
I've got several, if I can remember them through. As we look at the wastewater side, Mr. Sheffield, now we have just recently actually finished loan payments on the current wastewater treatment plant that is in use. Is that correct? As far as referring back to your slide where we have the debt services for water and wastewater. In my mind, we just recently paid for one and we would carry through. Is that taken into consideration as far as the increase in debt services?
Yeah, a little bit different animal. I mean, when you say we just finished paying for it, you know, the original sewer plant, essentially a significant part of it was funded through the county, and what they did was a clean waters assessment district. Back then, they actually formed a district, they issued the bonds, those went on to people's actual property tax roll payments, and then the county pays it, and then we repay them, but we receive the payments from that. So essentially, the customers were being assessed the same. So that going away did not really reduce our debt service requirements, it reduced our total debt. But you know, the numbers we provided in here are based on the actual debt service from the audited things. And we know what USDA is basically the maximum they can charge us under the established interest rates, the repayment plan. And additionally, part of that USDA application was for us to try and estimate the operating costs on the new plant as well. So yes, both of those have been taken into account in this calculation.
In the 2015 rate increase that went through the 5 years, and you'd already mentioned that it was a ramp up type rate increase. It seemed to me like the board of directors, I think it was the 3rd year, it actually passed on actually did not do a rate increase one of those years as well.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of the rate study prior to the last one. The 2015 was actually 5 years, beginning January 1st, 2016. First time in the history of TUD, we had 5 consecutive rate increases, both water and sewer. And I'm here to tell you, it did more to correct the financial condition of the district than anything else combined. Prior to that, numerous rate increases had been passed for 5 years, but never had been implemented for 5 years. The one directly before that was a 5-year rate increase. The 3rd year, whether it was new board, new general manager, combination of the thing, whatever the conditions, but at that time, they did not want to implement it. Same sort of thing here. If the board approves this rate increase, it's not locked in stone. I mean, you can't charge more. If we got to the 3rd year and said, oh my gosh, we need money for PG&E or whatever else, you can't just charge more. But if we got to the 3rd year and the board said, hey, you know, this new CIP is not going to be done, this got changed, now we're in so much better financial situation, we could do less in here if this proposes. But you can see here our real corrections that 1st year. So if you go down 2 or 3 years, rather than in the past when it was like another $5, another $6, another $10, whatever it was. In this one, it's going down each year, essentially. But you're right, the board could choose between now and July 1st to not do it or do a lower amount. And they have done that historically, not necessarily to the benefit of the financial health of the district.
It's, you know, 28% in the 1st year for water, and what was it, 17% for wastewater. That is a really steep slope to climb. Substantial impact to the majority of our customers. You know, 97% of them are 1 inch and less, but you know, that's our biggest customer base as far as a major impact. And we're almost a little bit deceptive. Hey, you know, I fully understand this. You know, this is a monthly increase, but our billing system isn't every other month. So literally, I don't know, whether you kind of forget the impact of, you know, the last bill you paid, but you know, suddenly you're hit with this, you know, substantial double increase from what we're looking at on this current slide.
I completely agree, and I have the empathy for it. And unfortunately, in hindsight, I think one of the historical things we've done is to go years where it passed increases. And that resulted in a larger increase. And so, we went since 2020 and we didn't have any increases at all. And so that caused it to be higher. Now, when you say 28%, it's shocking. That is a huge number. But my PG&E bill just went up 26% again. But, again, I think context is important here because we're talking about combined both water and sewer, $27 a month. Now, you say on there, but we pay 6 times bi-monthly, so it's not 27, it's 54. But the reality is it's $326 a year. People know that. So the 28% is a big number. But, again, I think that as soon as you say 28%, you have to put into context that it's $326. And I know it's a hardship and does that, but, the fact of the matter is, this is how we're able to maintain the quality of life we have here in this community as far as public health and safety, reliability, technology, and the future in here. So, and again, this is, the board entrusted me, to come up with this rate study, and I really feel we've done our due diligence. I think it's middle of the road as far as nothing in here is excessive or luxurious. On the same token, none of this is cut bare bones, put bubble gum in the tanks, do whatever on this. This is realistic. This is something this staff can achieve and this board can here. And yes, we understand there's a hardship and we've always shown we're willing to work with our customers any way possible. And there's actually more ratepayer assistance available now than there ever has been on that. So we're working with them as well as on that for our low income customers. But I appreciate your comments and I agree in there. I think context is important. Yes, it's 28%, but the next year after that, it goes considerably down. If we go back to 28%, the next year is 2.6 versus, we could turn around and say, okay, we're going to go 15, 10, 10, 10, 10, or whatever. But 28's what we need. I mean, we're going to have a $4.5 million deficit next year, best case, unless something radically changes.
Now, okay, that brings up another question. Did you say $4.5 million?
If you look here, down here, the revenue requirements for water for 2024.
Now, is that cumulative over the last, we haven't had a rate increase since January of 20. Is that 4.5 cumulative over that period of time as well too, that we're impacting that? I mean, and obviously we've had substantial.
It's a great question. Some districts do that, but in this rate study, we did not include any recovery for the deficit over the past 3 years. So what you're seeing there in that first column is solely that fiscal year's cost. There's no line in there for additional reserves. We're going to maintain our reserves right there, other than ideally we continue to increase them, but we don't want the rates to be higher than they have to be. We have the CIP at that capped average amount. So there's nothing in there that is recovering the losses that we have incurred over the past 3 years. This is adjusting at 24, and then going forward, that's how you get from the 4.5 to the 500,000 is basically, we'll enact that July 1st, 24. So the next year, instead of collecting 16 million in service charges, we'll be collecting 20.5 million. And that's going to cover even the increased expenses with inflation, with some of those. But great point to bring up. And no, it does not include past recovery.
Okay. And then looking at the 28%, I mean, overall 5-year rate increase, total of 35.7%. 28 actually represents 3/4 or 75% of the rate increase. Have the numbers been looked at as to which is greater? If we were to actually divide the 35% by 5, we'd have a and just rounding the numbers, we'd have a 7% rate increase each year over 5 years. Which number is actually greater as far as the, monies that we were talking about? Is it if we do the 28% upfront and then 2.6 and reducing down through, or is it a greater amount of money looking at a 7%, rounded 7% over the 5 years?
Yeah, we discussed that at the January 10th meeting. I think it came in after that discussion. But, when we originally looked at this, there's 3 ways to look at it. One is as it's presented here to true up that first year, get us correct. The next would be to do a flat rate across each year. And the last one would be to ramp up. Both the flat and the ramp up, you're going to continue to incur losses. So that first year, if we say we're going to cut it from $4.5 million to $2.5 million or whatever, then you have a $2.5 million loss that you have to make up. Unless we just say we eat it, but we don't have any money to eat it. So then the next year, again, instead of it being a 2% increase, it's going to have to be another 10% increase to do that. And until you get to that 28%, you're going to continue to incur losses. So ultimately, I felt for the benefit of the district and to keep the rates as not being higher than they absolutely have to be, this is what we're proposing. In 2015, we ramped up and that continued to cost us more money, and it's part of why we need the 28% now. So we have calculated all 3 ways. Again, if you continue to incur deficits, and it's like continuing to not pay off your credit card, it's going to just keep getting bigger until you get caught up. Are we going to get caught up in 5 years? Are we going to have different board members? Are we not going to enact the 3rd year of the rate increase? What are we going to do? There's an immediate need. That's why we came to the board in January. We are concerned with inflation. We're concerned with being able to continue operations as we do right now.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shippen. Thank you, President Kurtz.
Director Rainey, any questions?
No.
Yeah, I agree with Director Boatright. That's a big bite at 28%. However, we have, the CIP, that's the thing in my mind that's most important. We had that tank failure in Twainhart here last year. We know we've got other issues out there, time bombs waiting to go off. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's we've got a federal government that just flooding our economy with dollars and running this inflation up crazy. We've got a lot of things stacked against us here, and I agree, Steve, we have to do something. We have to do something. Whether or not it's 28% or not, that's what we need to discuss, but I hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
And, in response to that, Jeff, and for your benefit, David, the way the 218 works is everything will resolve around the public hearing. Okay, that's the next critical component. At this point, we come back next month, we're going to have a notice drafted that we want to send out to customers, and we would propose that we use these numbers as far as the customer notice. The customers can come to meetings, they can file formal protest, but once we get to that public hearing, then the board can adopt as presented unless the formal protest is in excess of 50%. The board could adopt a different number or a different timeline, or the board could not adopt. That's when the process goes. Customer notice, public hearing, enactment of rates next July 1st. And again, we're applying this 28%, this calculation, I hate to keep saying 28%, but the revenue requirement that we're proposing is across the board for all our fees, all our customers, everything. So you're essentially keeping what we have right now the same, but bringing in that additional funds.
Director Steve, and you brought up the formal protest. And during the presentation, you said, as far as for the 218 process, that we would send out notifications to both landlords and tenants. My concern there would be, does that convolute the formal protest?
One vote per parcel.
Okay, one vote per parcel.
So it'll go out to both of them. Either one of them votes no, they'll get one no on that. You can't have two no's for the same parcel.
Okay, just one clarification on that. Thank you.
Any more discussion from the board?
I'll just make a comment. I don't have any questions. I understand Steve's done a good job of laying this out, so it's understandable. I just will say this, that when I first came on the board, even though I've been attending all the meetings prior to 2012, boards prior to 2012 had done exactly what Steve was talking about of postponing or discontinuing rate increases that had already been put in place. And Steve came to TUD just about that same time. And TUD was nearly bankrupt. I mean, they had done some severe damage by delaying those. I'm not going to like this one little bit because I'm on a real tight budget myself, and so this is going to hurt. But do I want water or do I not want water? And when we had that big mainline break, what was it, about a month ago? Yeah. Even though I wasn't anywhere as close to it, I was apparently downstream from it, and I got a huge dose of dirty water and air in the lines and everything else, and so we don't have really much choice. That's the way I look at it, unfortunately.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the board? Okay, before we open this for public comment, I need a break. I apologize. We're going to take 5 minutes real quick.
Yes, I did.
I love it when we actually. I was trying to be more consistent, but I had some major thing happen.
Okay, we'll reconvene from our break here, and we will now open up the public comments. Mr. Buckley.
Good morning. So I'm speaking just as a ratepayer, so John Buckley, not for our center or anything. So very informative presentation, and as I will share, the agenda packet had lots of really helpful information. I think this was very helpful. So for the moment, I've already heard board members discuss your obligation to be representing, to provide water, and you're representing TUD and everything. If you had a completely different hat of only representing ratepayers, and you sent out a question of voting for all the ratepayers, because of all the needs of all their expenses and everything, would you be willing to support a 28% increase in rate? You would lose, overwhelmingly if that was, a ballot that you sent to everyone. That's not how it works. Instead, if somebody objects, they have to protest, they go through all this. You're not going to have enough people qualified to protest, no matter what happens. No one's going to be that well organized to protest. So whatever you do will be your choice based on the information available to you. And right now, with the 39 million of CIP expenses over the 5 years, that to me is the only area where potentially it could be stretched out for a longer period of time. But the board has already determined it's appropriate to be doing it. And Steve divided it up into $6.5 million a year to try and average it. But that's the only real option that shows in this presentation as to where you might have the opportunity to stretch it out for a longer period of time. And it still doesn't deal with the fact that you have the almost $4.5 million deficit for next year without doing the 28%. So the points that I, in my notes as I was going through all of this is, for the 97% of your customers, it's going to go from $774 a year. That's not counting the use part, but just your base rate, up to $990 a year, almost $1,000 a year, somewhere around a $200+ increase. And as Barb asked, this doesn't include anything for potential acquisition costs of PG&E facilities or anything like that. So just with what you now know is on your plate, there's going to be a 28% increase. So this is my feedback as a ratepayer who doesn't want to pay significant increases. I think Steve, as I've always shared in the past, is incredibly credible and effective in sharing the financial information in a way that is transparent and clear. I believe that, and I know it's not a vote today, and I'm not recommending a vote one way or the other, but what I am saying is I applaud as a ratepayer the clarity of the information in your agenda packet and the clarity of the presentation that's been made here that lays out the reasons why it's being proposed for a 28% increase, and based on how he shared it, rather than stretching it 777 or something like that, I understand why it is a higher whatever. So just simply sharing, it's frustrating, disappointing. The cost for some people is, again, I'll pick on Steve, he pointed out, well, PG&E is going up this too. Well, that's the thing. PG&E is going up too, gas prices, all the other things. So cumulatively, what you're doing with TUD is burdening many of those that are least likely to be able to easily afford it, because you're stretching across so many thousands of customers. There's a good percentage this is really going to be a burden for. So my last comment would be is communicate. Because when you put this out, there's going to be a reaction from some people that this is just an outrageous abuse by the board of directors and TUD staff. But if you can communicate as succinctly, not with all the details that are in your agenda packet, but as succinctly as possible why it's essential, you're more likely to have trust and at least acceptance by your ratepayers, those that weren't here for the presentation and understand why it's being put forward. So thank you, and again, I thought that was an excellent presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Anybody else? Atlanta? Anybody else? How about you, Corey? None? No. Okay. This is not a action item. So do you require anything else from us, Steve? Nothing else? Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
All right then. We'll move on to staff reports then.
Okay, good discussion, good meeting. Fairly busy couple of weeks for me, ordinarily, but just stuff I would like to report back. On the 24th of January, I met with Tracy Riggs, county CEO. Topics to discuss was wholly around the Tuolumne County Water Agency. We had a good, I think we spoke for an hour and a half. We had a good discussion, but primarily, her proposal to me is, is it time and do we want to have a joint meeting? And so, because of parents, we can talk about that offline. On the 31st, January 31st, maybe Eric will talk a little bit more about it, but we attended a Curtis Creek consolidation ceremony, which was phenomenal. I'll let Eric talk about that a little bit more. On the 7th, just FYI, I know most of you know, but not everybody knows, I had a nice phone call with Mike Schoner, PG&E, right, who we've been in negotiations with. There's no new news, but there's no bad news. We still anticipate getting back to the table at the end of the year, so or first of next year, so good enough. On the 10th, I met with Andre Rivera, also centered around the Tuolumne County Water Agency, but we were more specifically talking about stewardship of the Sullivan Creek watershed and what we think is the lead agency perhaps on the stewardship of that, and that conversation went really well. He's not a decision maker, but he was going to report back, and we're going to continue to meet and discuss that. We some of the topics we talked about that he wanted to talk about was the Horizon Plan, Chapter 2. He thinks that he's had that for a couple of months now. He's reviewed it several times. He thinks it's a wonderful document to start with, so that's good news. And of course, impacts that has to do with Phoenix Lake. Yesterday, President Kearns and I were at the LAFCO meeting in Jamestown. It was a short meeting, about an hour, pretty productive for an hour's meeting. Maybe you'll say more about that. And then Friday, right, the 17th, coming up, we have another coffee talk with Dawn and managers. So I'm hopeful, and that's going to be at Schnucks.
Yes.
At 7:30. 7:30 at Schnucks, and I'm looking forward to meeting with the public and answering the 1,000 questions. That's all I have.
You want to go? Oh, okay. All right. So in the spirit of employee recognition, again, I do have want to acknowledge one of our customers who called in and gave Kalisha a great kudos for one of our employees. So this time it's for Antonio Ramirez, who he's come presented to this board many times in the engineering department. And specifically a gentleman who he was working with to get a sewer lateral installed, called in and just wanted us to know that Antonio is really good at his job, that this gentleman has been in business for nearly 20 years and Antonio's understanding and abilities are some of the best he's ever seen. So thank you to him for acknowledging Antonio. And then in true TUD spirit, once Antonio got that compliment, he said, yeah, but it was a team effort, and acknowledged all the other people that were involved. So just kudos to Eric and his team and Antonio for providing just excellent customer service to our customers.
I didn't know that was what you were gonna.
Oh, did you already?
So that's perfect. That's perfect. And you all have met Antonio, and he does fantastic work. The detail there was that the gentleman was requesting sewer service, and Antonio and our new inspector were able to go out there and provide some kind of technical support, so save him thousands of dollars and look at a creative way to connect to our line and avoid pumping, which is always positive. So yeah, Antonio's doing a great job. And then I want to recognize and elaborate on what Dawn spoke about on the 31st. We had our Curtis Creek Elementary School consolidation. I don't know if you call it an inauguration or a celebration of some sort. President Kearns was there. We were also fortunate enough to have the State Water Board member there, Laurel Firestone, and several other state representatives or staff, I should say, including funding coordinator for our area with the Division of Financial Assistance. So they the kids out, several grades out. I don't know how many kids, maybe 100 or, yeah. And there were some very nice words spoken by the board president for the school board. And Jennifer, I want to really recognize her work on this project. She represented the district very well. We subsequently have had further communications with state staff, and they continue to echo how pleased they were with the event. And just to highlight, this project goes back to 2016. So it took 7 years to get a pipeline down Standard Road to connect to the school. That doesn't happen by accident. That's because there's got to be persistent efforts on both ends, a lot of coordination with the school, coordination with the Benitez family as we go through the town of Standard, coordination with SPI, coordination certainly with the school and the state and the contractor, and some coordination with the county on that project. So it wasn't an accident, and I want to recognize the board too, because they passed the water supply agreement. They gave the school the certainty and the surety that we would serve them, and that's what they needed in order to get over the finish line with the state and secure the funding. Thank you for the board's action.
Did TUD invite the folks from the State Water Board?
I should recognize Emily too. Thank you. I'm sorry. Emily coordinated this with the state staff, and I don't know if, I think the state initiated it, and then Emily coordinated the logistics. She did a fantastic job.
Well, that, to me, that is really a great move, because I know I invited Carmel Brown from the State Water Board couple of 3 times to the T-Stand Irwin meetings, as well as out on a couple of field trips. And that is powerful, because they see that the money is being used and how well it's being used. And I mean, that was just really smart. So good going.
I think Emily also submitted it to the Aqua newsletter. That's correct. And so we got a little publicity there. And we leveraged it. I went over to speak to the State Water Board and made comment on their drinking water grant funding program guidelines that they were considering, and every opportunity tout Sierra Pines and consolidation, and how this district's a great partner, a local partner, to leverage the state's staff and their dollars, and that we can deliver well and quickly on their objectives.
Great.
You've heard enough from me. But thanks.
Any other staff? Okay, we'll go on to Director's Communications. Director Rainey.
Okay, before I let everybody know what I've been up to, I want to congratulate Director Balin, who is now the Vice President for Mountain Counties Water Resource Association. So good going. Okay, on 2-1, I attended the Tuolumne County Natural Resources Committee meeting. That was one meeting that I felt got kind of out of hand. I ended up getting up and walking out early before it ended, but anyway, they were parsing letters, and I don't know what else. It just went on, and I couldn't handle it anymore. So, but that's the first one. Normally, I really look forward to those, because there are a lot of good things happening. On 2-3, I had a meeting with Steve and our GM, Don. And on 2-8, attended the Twain Hart Community Services District Association meeting. I didn't stay long for that, but I handed them the same thing that I handed you on the ice melt. And the reason for that was one of the things that's always irked me is how they did it, how they got away with it, I don't know, but Twinehart Market and that whole setup up there was put on that piece of property on the south side, along the south end of it. And then they have that huge parking lot. Well, when it snows or it rains and then it freezes, they go out there and throw rock salt so that people don't slip and fall. Well, that rock salt has gone throughout Twinehart, and that's what's brought it out bottom of all culverts and everything. So anyway, I thought maybe Twinehart, now that they're doing that water program, where they're going to try and put some water back in the ground as well as clean up the water going down to the Twinehart Lake and then on down to Phoenix Lake. Thought maybe they might want to go twist some arms and see if they don't want to try something new that's environmentally correct. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I'll share. Yeah, on February 3rd, Mountain County Water Resources Executive Board met, and we had an election of officers, like Director Regan said, and I'm pleased to say that Scott Ratterman of CCWD is now the board president, and he also has a, they were sort of coincided to the elections on the outside, so we don't just lose somebody because they lost an election. Suddenly they're no longer on Mountain County, so I'm really looking forward to working with Scott. And incidentally, CCWD, Calaveras County Water District, is very interested in working with the State Water Resources Control Board on this thing called conservation in the mountains, because of how we use our water and how it hydrates our county and for fire flow, et cetera. It's very different than the urban coastal environment. So I would like to continue pursuing that with them and with the State Water Resources Control Board, because they love getting out of their office and to see what this is all about. And as we know, we've been grappling with one size fits all and how they're making us ratchet down on certain things. So I think they're going to have an ad hoc committee, and I definitely volunteer for that. So just I'll be reviewing that. I just like the idea of defining what conservation means up here, where we have animals and 4-H and just a rural landscape. So that part is really good. So Mountain Counties, we agreed on hiring a really great legislative firm to help us sift through all the legislation on water quality. So we feel really confident about them weeding through some of this stuff, and I'm sure it's going to coincide with Aqua as well. And I also want to reply to TUD and just sort of shifting, little shifts in how TUD does business. For an example, taking a census of how many of you out there really read your miner's inch or whatever it was called after that. And so, well, is that the best use of that cost of putting out that paper versus having our general manager having coffee with people, and the cost of that? And so I like those little changes. They may seem subtle, but we are responding to the community. So I just want to again acknowledge Emily on some of that sensing of the community, and Dawn certainly for responding to that, because we are needing to adjust. And it fits with John, with your that communication aspect of communicating to TUD's doing it and getting out of our insulated environments into the public is really great. Last thing I just want to comment on is, again, thank you, Dawn, for reaching out, or the county reaching out to focus on the situations in our watershed. So TUD deals with the watershed in emergencies and rain, in storm events and atmospheric events, and to start partnering with the county on what does that look like, where is the money for watershed restoration, how can we partner. I think it's really, really commendable to work with Andre. And by the way, Andre and Kathleen, director supervisor, half what sat in or was on the Zoom portion of our mountain counties. So that I always really happy when folks like that show up to our campus. So good work. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Barb.
I have no reports, but I'm looking forward to hear about LAFCO.
Yeah, like Don said, we both went last night and wasn't much of a meeting. It was just one item on the agenda. And it all centered around special districts and our seats and how they defined them and how the terms worked and whatnot. And our seat, as you know, David, is up a year from May 24. We'll rotate off and Groveland will take it. There's the focused seat that we currently sit on now, which is a rotation between TUD, Groveland Community Services District, and Twin River Community Services District. Groveland's up next. They'll take over next year, next May. And then the other seat is dispersed around all the other smaller districts, Tawny City Sanitary and some of the others right on.
Yeah, fire district.
Yeah.
Like cemetery districts, all,
Yeah.
there's like 16 other small districts out there besides that large ones. I think they call that an at-large seat.
They do, I believe. Yep, so I believe that's what they call it. And there was maybe just a little bit of frustration that from some of the board members that LAFCO has been unable to get their work done that they'd like, in the speed that they'd like to get it done. And they're working on a solution for that, so we'll see what happens.
So the rotation for the seat will actually occur in May of
24, correct.
So my question is, I wonder when the rotation occurs and it goes to Groveland, suppose there's a proposed development or something like that in TUD's area. How do we get input in that if we don't feel it's going to be to the best advantage, or maybe there's a better way to do it or something like that?
Well, I don't believe there's anything that would keep us from attending the meeting and speaking, would it, Don? I mean, we could certainly do that.
President Kirk, you were absolutely correct. We would approach LAFCO then from a public stand side, such as in our meeting when a member of the public joins in the discussion for an item that is on our agenda or brings forth a item that will be acted on during the conference. So we would still have that. And certainly through our LAFCO association, LAFCO agencies.
Okay, that it?
Have to?
Okay, and then, I just want to make one quick comment on the Curtis Creek event that we did. I thought Jennifer did an awesome job. She was kind of the MC, and I have to say, I'm really pleased with a lot of the homegrown talent we have here at TUD. I mean, Jennifer certainly one of them. Dave Gratian was a local boy that came up through the ranks here. David, you did too. And Kurt Byers, and you could go on and on, Trevor Cap, on and on. I can name many people, but it warms my heart to see that we have such talent right here in Tawny County that we draw from. And I just needed to say that. So, and that's all I have. So, if anybody else has any last words of wisdom, if not, we'll go ahead and adjourn.